Anyway, I don't know if anyone else heard that. But anyway, so the wake-up call was two incidents, really. One where my ex he came to my home and completely disrespected me in my home. It was not the first time. It did become the last. We'll talk about that in a moment. But the second incident was I had taken my children on a trip to Arizona to visit my sister, and we were guests in her home. And the way they behaved was quite honestly very embarrassing to me. And my sister was stunned. And by this time, they were 9 and 11. So, not little kids anymore, right? Old enough to know better, old enough to know how to respect someone in their own home, right? We were guests. And so it was embarrassing for me, but I felt sad for my kids because I started to have this realization that I had let them down, that I hadn't shown them properly how to respect somebody else because I hadn't shown them properly how to respect me through my boundaries and expectations, right? So I mean, it was this trip. I love them. They know this trip was what led to all the changes. And you know what? Honestly, I think they're grateful for it too because we all get along so much better now. But I'm telling you, like in the airport, they didn't know how to behave. On the airplane, they didn't know how to behave. It was so embarrassing. And as their mother, it is my responsibility to teach them these things, right? And I have to be honest with you for a moment because I felt this way. I know the women I work with feel this way oftentimes. When I started realizing how much I had let things slide and that I let my kids down and I taught them not to respect me and by extension, not respect others or themselves, I also started to feel very frustrated because the truth is they were being modeled disrespect 50% of the time in their other home, right? And I used to think to myself, what good does it do to set boundaries with them or with him, my ex, when they're seeing the complete opposite the rest of the time? But here's the problem with that mentality. And I say this with compassion, never judgment, because I hold myself in compassion now and I encourage the women I work with to do the same. When we approach it in that way, like why even bother? We allow ourselves to be a victim of circumstances. And the truth is, as a victim, we are powerless, right? But when we use boundaries, when we take our power back, we shift into a victor role, a leader role in our lives. Okay. And so here's what I learned and what I want to share with all of you today. Even in difficult circumstances that so many of us find ourselves in, we still deserve boundaries. We still deserve respect. And our kids deserve to learn that from us too, right? So in an ideal world, sure, they'd learn it from both homes, right? But when they're not learning it in both homes, it's even more important that we step up and we model it for ourselves, right? Because they have to learn it somewhere. And it's not always fair, but it is still a choice. Okay, boundaries are still a choice. And I'm telling you, it's one that will change everything. So for me, my real turning point was that trip to Arizona. It was when my ex showed up and disrespected me in my home in front of them. Okay. And I'm going to get to that in a moment too. But that's when I said, we cannot keep living this way. We need boundaries. Some things need to change around here, right? They weren't optional anymore. What I found was that they were really the foundation for my healing, my parenting, and my self-worth. So once I recognized that, everything shifted, right? I went from that victim state, kind of crossing my fingers and hoping things would change, to that victor state, right? Like I stood up and I took ownership of what I was allowing and I chose differently. And it was, it started small at first, but small and consistent because consistency builds momentum and momentum builds confidence. So, if I'm being honest, I know it's hard and uncomfortable at first when things are new, but with my kids, I started saying no and I meant it. And it was hard for them at first too. And there was a bit of kind of like bargaining back and forth. No, mom, this is not how we used to do it. Or no, I don't want to. And I was just like, no, no is a boundary. It is a full, complete sentence. Whether you're talking to your kids or your ex or a boss, a friend, you can say no and stand for a minute, right? That's a boundary. Remember at the beginning when we were all raising our hands like, yep, I've said yes and wanted to say no before. It's okay to say no when it's the right choice for you, right? And then the other changes were I started leading my home from my values instead of the chaos and the patterns and the habits that they were bringing from their other home. So guess what? I took away the Xbox. I totally did. To this day, my kids have not seen it. It's in my room. We don't use it. Never should have been in my home. It was a free gift from my internet provider. That's why it was here, to be honest. And you know what else? I set chores and expectations. Each time my kids are here, they know what they need to do every day. We get active together as a family. And they still, I mean, there's a little bit of like, oh, I gotta run today, whatever, but I don't have to really remind them anymore. Hard at first, but worth it in the long run, let me tell you. Okay. So when it came to that incident with my ex in my home, I took action there too. It was an incident where he was speaking very disrespectfully to me in my home. And by this point that this happened, I had been working on boundaries for a while. I had been working on learning how to regulate my nervous system so I could communicate boundaries from a grounded, calm space. And so when he spoke to me in the way that he did, I responded, I don't allow people to speak to me that way. And then he kept going and he wouldn't stop. And I said, you will have to leave and come back when you're calm. And you know, it worked because I think he was so stunned. I'd never spoken that way, but I didn't ever want to be in a situation where that could happen again. So I took even further action. I actually reported the situation to the police so that we could get an exchange place in public where now I've not seen him face to face since. I wasn't even going to take the chance. And you know what? Did my kids completely understand? No. Was it weird to them at first? Yes. But I stood firm in that boundary. And I know it's hard as moms because we love our kids so much, but if you don't feel safe, that's not you can't show up for your kids in the way that they deserve either. So if you're not feeling safe, it's not good for them either. You are allowed to set a boundary. Okay. So let me just tell you, for me, boundaries changed everything. They gave me my energy back. They ended the endless arguments with my ex. They gave my kids the consistency that they desperately needed. And most importantly, they gave me back. I went from feeling like that victim of circumstances to really feeling empowered in my life and understanding that there are things that I can do for me and that's okay. So that's why I teach this work now because boundaries are the foundation. They are the piece that makes all of the rest of healing possible. Because when you set standards when you set standards for yourself, for what you will or will not allow in your life, you take your control and your power back over what you can control in your life, right? And now, as I've worked with women over the past few years, I've noticed a common theme that it's not just divorced women that need help with boundaries. It's so many of us because we never learned it when we were young, right? So always, always, always be easy with yourself as you come to these realizations. Have love and compassion for yourself because you know what? When you know better, you do better, right? So today we are going to focus on the three main types of boundaries. So boundaries with yourself, because yes, we need them with ourselves too. So we can stop saying yes when we want to say no, right? We're also going to talk about boundaries with others, just like I needed them with my kids and I needed them with my ex, and I'm sure you have others that you need boundaries with in your life. And we're also going to talk about boundaries with time, right? So you stop feeling guilty when you decide not to answer an email from work past 6 p.m., right? But before we jump into the three types of boundaries, I want to address a couple myths that I think a lot of people have when it comes to boundaries, okay? So one of the biggest myths I hear is if I set boundaries, I'm selfish, or I'll hurt my kids, or I'll make things worse, right? But here's the mistake that this creates. That's why we overgive, and that's why we say yes when we mean no, and that's why we put everyone else's needs ahead of our own, right? Here's the truth. Boundaries are not selfish. I like to think of them as love in action. Love, self-love first, but also love with others because it shows people when you set a boundary how you want to remain in relationship with them, right? They teach others and our kids that respecting yourself is normal. It is. So they create more peace, not less. So I want to teach a quick tool, okay? So jot this down if you guys have your pen and paper still handy or grab it real quick because this is a good one. I call it the boundary guilt reframe. Okay. So the not true belief about boundaries is if I set this boundary, I'm going to hurt them. That's not true, but so many of us think it's true, right? We're just going to flip it. Listen to this. If I don't set this boundary, I'm teaching them it's okay for people to hurt me. Let that sink in for a minute. It's not okay for people to hurt you. You deserve boundaries and respect, right? So I hope you take that one home with you because that's a good, it's powerful. And actually, we're going to take it one step further and we're going to practice. We're going to practice a guilty thought that you had about boundaries. Maybe it's what we just said. Maybe it's, you know, I'm selfish or I'll make things worse, whatever it might be. Think about it. What's a guilty thought you've had about why you haven't set a boundary? And you can jot it down. If you want to type it in the chat, that'd be great. Either way. And then we're going to use that reframe, right? So if I don't set this, what message am I teaching? Okay. I'll give your guys like a couple seconds here. If I don't set this boundary, what message am I teaching? Another example for me, when I thought about setting rules for my kids, I was like, well, I don't want to set rules. It must be so confusing for them, going back and forth between two homes. No, this is the reframe that I practiced until it sunk in because I needed it. If I don't set this rule for my home, I'm teaching my kids it's okay for people not to respect me. It's not. It's not okay. That's how we take our power back because boundaries, they don't hurt anybody, okay? They're teaching love and respect. If you think your boundaries hurting somebody, that's just your boundary guilt and you got to keep working on your reframes, okay? But I get it. I've been there, so no judgment. Always just love and compassion. All right, so I want to talk about one other myth that I hear a lot when we talk about boundaries. I often hear my ex or my friend or whoever it might be, my kids, whoever it might be, will never respect my boundaries, so why even bother? Now, here's the mistake that this creates, the limitation that it causes, I should say. Okay. If we avoid boundaries altogether and we keep waiting for someone else to change, we just hope things get better, we stay stuck in resentment, right? And that's not good for you. It's not good for your body. It's not good for your heart. It's not good for your relationships and your connections. Look, we can't control what others do or don't do. We can only control what we choose to do for ourselves. Okay? So the truth is, boundaries are not about controlling anyone else. They are about protecting your peace. So instead of waiting for others to change, the shift is I cannot control them, but I can control me and I can lead with clarity and consistency, right? Because it may be that people won't fully respect your boundaries or show up in the way that you want them to be, but you can choose how much you engage with them, right? You can choose what you allow. And actually, I want to go back to the example of my ex in my home. And I had to say to him, I don't allow people to speak to me that way. And he did. He eventually came back. I told him he had to leave when he calmed down. He eventually came back. It was an exchange day for the kids. And I don't know what was said. I don't know what was said after he picked them up. I have since heard not nice things. I know he doesn't speak about me in a very respectful manner. I can't do anything about it. I can't. And is it frustrating? It is. I choose not to focus on that though because I can't control it. And focusing on what I can't control, when I was doing that 6 years ago for 4 years, made me feel crazy. I don't do it anymore. I focus on what I can control. And what I did is that day that he spoke to me that way, I stood firm in my boundaries. I modeled self-respect. I had my back, right? And you know what? My kids saw that too. So you can't control the impact someone else is going to have. You can control the impact that you have. Okay. And I want you to know how powerful it really is. Okay. Because sometimes I think we forget that, right? All right. So even if these people that you need to set boundaries with never change, you will. You will stop leaking your energy. You will stop carrying resentment and you will show others, your kids, what respect looks like. Okay. So again, boundaries are all about your standards that you set for yourself in your life. It's all about what you choose to allow and what you choose not to allow. Okay. You teach your kids and others what it takes to have relationships and interactions with you. Okay. They're not walls that keep people out. A lot of times people like to think of boundaries like that. That's not what they are. They're more like doors and windows that let the right things in, right? So ask yourself, reflect for a moment. What is one thing maybe that you want more of right now? Like peace, respect, time. Or where is it, I guess, let me ask you this. When do you feel the most at peace? Around who? Where do you feel the most respected? Where do you feel the lightest? Maybe situations or around people. Because I say this because when you feel light and uplifted and like you can really truly be yourself and speak with your authenticity, you're around people who are honoring your boundaries, right? Now, where do you feel the most drained? Or do you ever feel like you have to like shrink yourself? Or do you ever feel restricted? Because your body will tell you where a boundary is needed. Yeah, when you start thinking about these things, it's kind of crazy. Yeah, how your body is like this signal. Because if something makes you feel like you can't speak up or like you have to shrink yourself, it means a boundary is likely needed or being crossed, right? So we'll get more to that in a minute, but I want to start talking about the three different types of boundaries. Okay, so boundaries with yourself, because again, we need boundaries with ourselves. And you're going to see, we're going to tie it all together at the end, why all three of these types of boundaries matter, how they all kind of interwork with each other. So if you have really good boundaries in one area, maybe with yourself, but not so good with time boundaries, like you'll see, we'll get there. But anyway, we're going to start with boundaries with yourself. So a boundary with yourself is really a commitment that you make and keep with yourself. It's about honoring your limits, your needs, and your values. Okay, so it could be something like choosing not to check your ex's social media. That's a commitment that you make to yourself to protect your peace. It could be something like choosing to read a new self-help book every morning instead of scrolling. That's on Instagram, which I know I've been guilty of. I've had to make this commitment to myself. And that's a commitment to your energy, to your growth, right? It could be setting aside 20 minutes a day for journaling or for movement. That's a commitment to your well-being. See, these are all boundaries. Even refusing to speak to yourself in self-critical ways. That's a commitment to yourself, to your self-respect, right? Or earlier, when we said who says yes when they want to say no, and we raised our hands, that's a commitment, like that's a choice. Have you ever stopped to think like, why do I say yes when I want to say no? Nobody's making me, right? Like, why do I do that? I mean, and you might feel like you have to say yes, but you don't. You're still choosing to say yes. If you feel like you have to, that's that boundary guilt we talked about. You got to reframe it. But that's a commitment to yourself. You can say no, right? So, unlike boundaries with others, where you teach people how you want to be treated, you communicate that with them, boundaries with yourself are about teaching yourself how to honor you. Okay. And it takes practice just like anything else. So, right now, I want to take a moment to pause and reflect. What is maybe one boundary with yourself that you're already honoring? Maybe it's giving yourself a daily walk, or maybe it's keeping work off your phone at night. Whatever it is, just think about it. If you want to share it in the chat, that's great. If not, jot it down. Jot it down. This is powerful. When we start looking through like the boundary lens, where we're holding them and where we're not, it's really powerful to become aware of these things. And then once you have that, think about one boundary with yourself that's still needed. Maybe it is committing to saying no when you're at capacity, right? Maybe it is. And this is another thing I had to work on early when I was trying to get better at saying no, or saying no when I wanted to say yes, when I had to get better at saying no. Sometimes I would still say yes. And then I would feel that sense of regret. And then I would change my mind. So I don't, this is not, you're not going to be perfect at this right away. This is a practice. I just want you to be open to receiving and trying some of these, setting these boundaries, because it really is powerful once you do that. Okay. So yeah, drop it in the chat if you want. Otherwise, write it down for yourself. One boundary with yourself that's needed. All right, and we're going to move on to boundaries with others. So, boundaries with others is about clearly communicating what you will and will not allow, right? And following through on your actions, right? You cannot control another person's behavior, but you can decide how you'll respond when any sort of disrespect or overstepping happens, okay? So, an example, your ex is yelling on the phone, right? You are going to first communicate. I'm open to this conversation when it's respectful. And then if the yelling continues, what do you do? Do you tell him again? I'm open to this conversation when it's respectful? No, you do not. If he continues to yell, then you remove yourself from the situation. It's okay to end the call in that situation. Okay. It doesn't feel good. It feels uncomfortable, but we have to follow through with action. If we just say it and we don't put that action behind it, this is reminding me, I think, of Zakiel's presentation. Action is everything, right? We need that action. Or in another situation, a friend maybe drops by unannounced when you've asked for notice. And you can say something like, look, I love seeing you, but I also need advance notice before visits. Let's plan a time that works for both of us. That's a boundary, right? That's a boundary, and it's okay to say that. Another scenario might be if a family member pressures you to share details that you're not comfortable with sharing. And I know I've been there, and it's like, oh man, I probably shouldn't say this, but they're really expecting me to say it, so I think I have to say it. No, you don't. You can say, I'm not going to talk about that. Thanks for understanding. So, unlike boundaries with self, which are commitments that you make to yourself, boundaries with others are about teaching people how to treat you, right? What you allow and what you don't allow, and then backing it up with consistent action. Because remember, you can't control how they receive or respond to the boundary, but you can control how you will. Okay. All right. So, I want to talk about what boundaries you've maybe already communicated and held. Like if you can, this is a time for reflection again. If you can think about a boundary that you've communicated and held, maybe one that you're really proud of. It's good to be proud of yourself when you do these things. I was super proud of myself that day. I stood firm and calmly told my ex, I don't allow people to speak to me that way. You'll need to leave. That was big for me. So it's important that we reflect where we have been successful. This is also reminding me of Zakiel when you told us we have to have the evidence, right? The small evidence is where we build that confidence, and holding boundaries takes confidence. It really does. So where have you communicated and held a boundary before? Maybe with your ex, your kids, even a friend, maybe with work. And then I'll think and reflect, what is a boundary with others that is still needed? Like maybe it comes to you're only willing to talk to people about certain things. Like when it comes to my ex, we are very specific on what we talk about. And we made it clear that it's only about the kids and things that they need. Maybe it's the tone of conversations, like on phone calls. Maybe it's different things that get brought into your home. I have boundaries with my kids about things that they can bring into my home and things that they cannot. And then if you're not sure, remember your body always speaks the truth. So if you can think about, where do I feel like I have to shrink myself? Where do I feel like I have to silence myself? Where do I feel restricted? Chances are that's somewhere you may need a boundary, right? Because remember, when your boundaries are being honored, you feel uplifted and lighter. You can be yourself, right? So jot it down. If you want to put it in the chat, great. I want this mostly for you, though, to reflect on later, because boundaries, this is just the beginning, right? Now we're going to talk about boundaries with time. So, a boundary with time is about protecting your most valuable resource, right? Your energy and your attention. So, time boundaries help you really stay aligned with your priorities instead of being pulled in like every which way, right? So, an example for a time boundary might be, you know, I'm not going to respond to emails after 6 p.m., emails from work after 6 p.m., right? Another boundary when it comes to time might be if a coworker is always asking for last minute help, right? Can you help me on this project? It's due tomorrow. And you might say, You might feel because you want to help them, oh my gosh, I want to help them, but it's not your responsibility. You can set a boundary. I can't take this on today. Next time, if you need if you need help, please let me know at least 24 hours in advance or something like that, right? Another time boundary that was a big one in my house for a long time was bedtime. My kids always wanted to stay up later than I would allow, right? And it was a bit of a battle because their other home was different, but I had to stay firm in my boundaries. Bedtime is at 9 p.m. This is how we rest to take care of ourselves, and we're going to stick to that 9 p.m. bedtime. So unlike boundaries with yourself, which are commitments to yourself, and boundaries with others, which are communicating how you want to be treated, boundaries are about managing where your hours and energy actually go. Okay, so we're going to reflect again. So what's one time boundary that you already have in place? Maybe it's the no work emails after 6 p.m. Or maybe it's setting a timer for social media so you're not on it for too long. I've had to do that before. Yeah, one that you're already honoring, and then a time boundary that's needed. Taking time, maybe blocking out time for a rest or blocking out time for exercise, right? Prioritizing something for you and setting aside time for it, right? So writing that down so you can reflect on, putting it in the chat if you'd like, so we can inspire and encourage one another. And you know what, actually, real quick, I want to pause here on time, the time boundary, because ironically, a lot of times one of the biggest objections I often hear is, I don't have time to learn how to do these boundaries. And, it takes so much practice and effort and consistency because it does. It does. And I'm already juggling so much. This is what I hear a lot. And honestly, I was there too. But remember, I wasted 4 years, 4 years living in chaos because I didn't have boundaries. It took me like a sliver of that amount of time to learn and implement boundaries. And it was challenging at first because here's the truth. Every time you say yes when you mean no, you're already giving your time away. You are. So while boundaries are, I mean, it's something new, it's a skill, it's a strategy. You have to be consistent. Ultimately, they don't cost you time, they give you time back. They stop you from being pulled into arguments. They stop you from running yourself ragged, right? Trying to please everybody. So just think about that. Okay? Think about that when you're contemplating beginning to set boundaries. It is worth it. I promise you 100%. Okay? So what I want you to do now, we've talked about the three boundaries, is the boundaries with self, right? And then others, and then time. I want you to take a moment and realize that the power of these boundaries does not come from controlling anyone or anything. It comes from deciding how you will respond and choosing what you will allow and what you won't allow in your life. Okay. So I want you to continue after you leave here today. I want you to really continue to start paying attention in your own life to how you feel around people and different situations, whether you feel expansive and like you can really breathe and be yourself, or if you feel restrictive, like you have to shrink yourself or make yourself smaller. Okay. Because again, that feeling is your signal that a boundary is likely needed. The body always tells the truth. Okay. You just have to learn to trust it. Okay. All right. So now we've seen boundaries. They show up in those three powerful ways, right? With yourself, others, and time. And each one really is essential because together they create the foundation for living with clarity, peace, and self-respect. If you're really strong, it's really almost impossible to be really good at setting boundaries with yourself and not with time. Because think about how much of your commitments to yourself rely on time, right? It's not really possible to be really good at setting boundaries with others if you're not good at setting boundaries with yourself, right? Because think about it. If I say, um, I'm not going to say yes when I want to say no. Well, usually that involves other people, right? So really it's a practice. We have to focus on practicing boundaries in those three areas to really get good at it so that they have the transformation in our lives that we want and that we deserve. Okay. I just want to get real for a minute though and be honest. I know with all this information, even with some of the scenarios and examples I gave, boundaries are going to feel uncomfortable at first, okay? And really that's because it's new, it's different, and also because so many of us have been conditioned to avoid conflict, to feel guilty for saying no, or to fear rejection. That's why we're new to boundaries, right? That's why we haven't figured them out yet. There's a reason. Okay. So don't judge yourself. We're learning here. We're here to learn and grow, right? But inside my coaching program, I do go deeper with the women on the why behind that because when you understand why you've struggled to set boundaries in the past, you can begin to heal those patterns and make different choices going forward. And that's really what makes boundaries more sustainable. Okay. And while we don't have time to unpack all of that today, of course, here is what I want you to remember. Okay. If setting boundaries feels uncomfortable, it doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. Okay. It just means you're practicing something new. And with practice, it does get easier. Okay. So, real quick, let's just ground this together. I want you to think back to one of the boundaries that you identified earlier that you need to set, whether it be a boundary with yourself or a boundary with others, or maybe a boundary with your time. I want you to hold that boundary in your mind. Okay. And just place your hand over your heart because I loved Kat is so right that this is the best. Catherine Veronica, she's so right that when we connect with our mind and our heart, like we set intentions in ways that are super powerful. So we're gonna think about that boundary that you chose earlier that you really need to set, the most important one. Place your hand on your heart. And we're gonna take 3 slow breaths together. We're gonna inhale through the nose. Exhale, release, let it go through the mouth. We'll do again, inhaling through the nose. Exhale through the mouth, let it go. Inhaling through the nose. Exhaling through the mouth, let it go. And then keeping your hand there and your eyes closed if you feel safe, allowing the breath just to return to its natural rhythm. I want you to just repeat silently to yourself or maybe out loud. Hearing your own voice is so powerful. I am safe to hold this boundary. I am safe to hold this boundary. I am safe to hold this boundary. And then allowing yourself a moment there to feel how it feels when you connect with that intention in your body. This is how you begin building the strength to carry boundaries into your daily life because you're setting that intention first with yourself. Okay. All right. Thank you all. So here's the good news. Boundaries really do change everything with yourself. They restore confidence. With others, they protect your peace. With time, they give you your time and energy, your life back, right? And I know some of you might be thinking, and again, because I've been there too, Brandy, my situation's different. You have no idea. My ex is high conflict. My kids push back. My family doesn't respect me. And I've had clients in the past say that same thing too. But I want to share this story with you today of one of my recent clients who told me just that. She said, my ex is never going to change. My kids are way set in their ways. You know, all the things we think before we start setting boundaries. But within working together with just a few weeks, she told me she was starting to feel more at peace and more like herself again. The things with her kids and her ex were still a work in progress, but she was at peace because she had more respect for herself. It all starts there. You can't expect others to respect you if you don't respect yourself. Okay. So we're still working on it, right? But she has made so much progress in such a short amount of time. I had another client that told me that she'd been married twice before. She wished she had learned about boundaries after her first marriage 20 years ago. And you know what I told her? And I'll tell all of you this too. We can't dwell on what we didn't know when we didn't know it, right? If we're going to be upset with ourselves because I didn't learn about boundaries 20 years ago, are we going to move forward or are we going to stay stuck? We're gonna stay stuck, right? So I told her, love the person that you were then. You didn't know. Now you know you're doing better, right? So we can't control the past, right? But we can take action today to make changes that will promise us a brighter future tomorrow, right? And that is the power of boundaries, okay? They're not about changing anyone. They're about changing how you show up. And when you change, everything around you starts to shift too. Okay. So again, They really truly give you your power back. They help you take back control over your life as you shift from seeing yourself as that victim of circumstances, kind of like holding and wishing, things to change, to taking that back control and shifting into a leader of your life. And I'm living proof too, right? I went from 4 years of chaos after my divorce to living with clarity and peace. And it wasn't because my ex changed, right? It was because I did. I finally stopped waiting for others to respect me and I started respecting myself. And I'm telling you, if I can do it, you can too. Okay, so over the past few years, I've had the privilege of working with so many women, but here's what I've realized. It's not, I think I said, I don't know if I said this earlier, but it's so important. I want to repeat it. It's not just divorced women that need this work, right? It's single women, it's married women, it's women who are moms, it's women who aren't moms. So what I would like to do now, if you all feel that you've learned some things today, do you guys feel like you've gotten some value and learned some things about boundaries? Okay, because I'm super excited about this offer I'd like to share with all of you. I have created a boundary workshop because today we talked about really surface level things about the three types of boundaries. I've actually created a boundary workshop that we're going to dive deeper on Saturday, October 11th at 2 p.m. Eastern. Okay, it's called the Boundaries That Set You Free because remember, boundaries are the key to the freedom that you deserve and you desire. Okay. So we're not just going to talk at this workshop, we're going to practice together. You'll learn how to identify whether boundaries missing with yourself or with others or with time. You will learn simple scripts that you can say without guilt, even when others push back. I will teach you tools to regulate your emotions when boundaries feel uncomfortable. And you will also learn how to model healthy self-respect for your kids and others. Okay. You'll also get my Boundaries That Set You Free workbook and a live Q&A session with me. Okay. And now here's why this is a really special offer because normally this kind of boundary work, this deep boundary work is only available inside my private one-to-one coaching program. And a 90-minute workshop like this is typically valued at least like $97, at least. Okay. But because this is a special summit, I'm offering it for you today for only $47. I'm gonna, in a moment, I'll have a QR code with the link or the link in the chat. I think someone might have dropped it in the chat. And you'll see when you follow it that the discount is already applied. Okay. And look, as a mom, especially, I know I hesitate sometimes to spend money on myself. I know that's common, but let me just reframe this for you. Okay. Not having boundaries is already costing you and your energy and your peace, even in the example that your kids are seeing. $47, if you think about it, is less than like a dinner out these days, right? And we do that willingly without thinking about it, right? But this workshop is really an investment in your freedom and in your future. Okay. And I do also want to acknowledge it is on another Saturday, but I see you showing up today here, choosing to spend your time with us this weekend. So that tells me how committed you are to your growth. So I don't take that for granted. And while I do know that life is full and your time is precious, not having boundaries is already costing you, as we talked about earlier, right? Probably in hours weekly, right? And the arguments, the stress, the second guessing. This workbook or this workshop, I should say, is designed to give you your hours back. Because once you know how to set and hold clear boundaries, I'm telling you, you stop wasting time in conflict and you really start living in peace. Okay. So if you're ready to stop leaking energy and really stop carrying that resentment, and start leading with clarity and peace. I'm gonna show you the slide here in a minute, but register for the Boundaries That Set You Free workshop today, okay? Because this presentation gave you some insights, but the workshop will give you the transformation that you deserve and you desire. So give me one moment, guys. Working on the tech here myself. Um, Here it is. Can you guys see it? So we can take a picture of this. And that is going to be on October 11th at 2 p.m. Eastern. And I hope to see you all there. I want to thank you so much for your time today and for showing up for yourself and for spending your weekend with us this weekend. I'm so excited for the rest of the summit, so stick around. Thank you all so much. I'm going to stop sharing now.
Thank you so much, Brandy. I got so much out of that. Every time I hear you speak about boundaries, I get something newly for myself. Boundaries truly are the way that you set yourself up for success so that you can protect what it is that you're creating. And I am just so happy to be here on this summit with you. Thank you for sharing. And now, now we have such